Hey, gorgeous souls, it's Vix, and I'm here today to talk to you about the witch wound. So, this is probably something that you have heard of before, maybe not, but it's a phrase that is used quite often in witchy circles, spiritual communities, and yeah, a lot of people use it to describe lots and lots of different things, which is part of the interesting thing about this phrase. So, everything that I share in this video is very much coming from my personal perspective, my personal experience with the witch wound. You might be experiencing it in a different way. That doesn't make you wrong. That doesn't make me wrong. It's just that this is kind of a really big umbrella term that covers a whole bunch of stuff that can come up for us and it's kind of going on for us within our spiritual journey. One thing I would like to say before I continue, some of the language I'm going to use in this video is going to I'm going to be talking about women. That's just because the witch wound is something that impacts women a lot because of what happened in history, the burning times. It was a very large proportion of women. It was mostly women. It wasn't only women. There were men who were being burned at the stake as well, and there were men who were being hanged, but it was kind of a women's problem mostly. But I don't want this video to be like, oh, it was only women and this is just a chick's issue, because it's not. And there's going to be many people who identify as women or don't identify as women who are going to relate to some of this stuff. So I just want to let you know that if my language gets a little bit like women-y, that is, it's just kind of what we're talking about here, because women seem to be the ones who are carrying the witch wound. If you identify as a woman, you may feel that you're carrying it, but as a man also, you may also feel like, hang on, I've also got a pretty serious witch wound going on. So, it's for everyone. The witch wound is for everyone. Okay, so just trying to get that out of the way, and just, as always, I am like, my practice and my work and my life, like I'm here to be like fully inclusive for everybody, no matter how you identify. If you have a witch wound, you're welcome here. And if you don't have a witch wound, you're also welcome here to have a listen and see what you think about this topic. So, what is the witch wound? Okay. It's really difficult to let's define it in 3 easy steps. So, as I mentioned, it really kind of comes out of this, the time in history when witches were being put on trial, they were being burned, they were being hanged, they were being persecuted in all sorts of other ways as well. And it was really horrendous. And I'm not going to go into like the whole detail of the history. There's other people who will make videos about the history. You can go onto Wikipedia, you can go onto the internet, and you can find out all of the facts and figures. But it was an astronomical amount of people who were killed during those times. And many of us, subconsciously, unconsciously, or consciously, are still carrying the pain from that, whether it is through the fact that you experienced that in a past life. And that doesn't mean that you were necessarily a witch who was put on trial. It could be that you were put on trial and you weren't a witch in that life. It could be that you had a totally different life, but you were persecuted for your spiritual views, you were persecuted for something else. Like, the witch wound is kind of just like, hey, let's talk about all the times that we were persecuted in our past lives, right? You may have been in a different religion, a different spiritual group, but still experiencing that persecution. So it can come through your past lives. It can also come through from your ancestral lineage. So if there are people in your family who experience that, in your blood family or in your, what I like to call your love family. So maybe people who weren't necessarily related to you by blood, but like family friends or, other lineages that we have. I'm very much a believer that, if you're adopted or taken in by a family that is not blood, you can also take on some of their ancestral stuff. Cool. So there's that. It can be ancestral, it can be from your past lives, but it can also just be from the collective. So we just have this like really just massive collective issue that feels like it's still very present today. And there is definitely, a lot going on when it comes to women being seen, for it being okay for us to be out in the world and doing whatever we're doing, right? Like, you can pretty much get persecuted for anything as a woman. I know that men experience that, and I know that those who identify as neither are really experiencing that right now. So, there's a persecution thing happening. And that can definitely bring up the witch wound. It may be that you neither have a past life, an ancestral issue, or even a collective issue, but you've experienced some persecution in this life for something. So that's kind of the gist. And the witch wound is kind of just this phrase that we use to kind of just explain everything that comes under this, like, you've been persecuted because of your spiritual beliefs or because of who you are, or because you're a woman, because you're a bit witchy, because you're a healer. One thing I don't think we talk about enough is that a lot of the people who were being put on trial as witches and being burned and all of the terrible things that were happening weren't actually witches. They weren't like us. They didn't do spells, they didn't do magic, they weren't even into this stuff. But one of the massive problems that we are still kind of dealing with is that people were just kind of, hey, she's a witch and that's it. And this is another thing that comes up with the witch wound. Although the persecution element is very strong, and the persecution element of this can make us feel like it is not safe for us to be seen. It is not safe for us to call ourselves witch. It is not safe for us to tell anybody that we do magic. All of those kind of beliefs very much come from the witch wound. I'm just going to stay in the broom closet. So whether that's being seen as a magical person or whether it's just being seen in any way, shape or form in the world can come from this. But another aspect of the witch trials was that women were going against women. And this is, I told you I was going to talk about women a little bit. But what we saw a lot, or at least what we can see from the history when we look at the trials and the books and the information that we have, a lot of the time, yes, it was the men in power who were lighting the matches, but women were pushing each other into the fire. And very often, if you were somebody who could point out, hey, so-and-so's a witch, then you wouldn't, it wouldn't happen to you, it would happen to them instead, right? Like, people were just kind of, hey, if I push these women onto the fire, maybe I'll save myself. So there's that whole thing. And what the witch wound has kind of done for some of us is it has given us a real distrust of other women. So that's like a really big thing. That's a really big thing. We don't trust each other because we have this collective wound around, are you going to push me onto the fire? If it comes down to it, are you going to push me? Am I going to push you? What will happen here? So there can be a really, really strong kind of distrust between women. So that can be something as well, that if you find it really hard to trust women, you find it really hard to have female friendships, if you're a woman and you struggle with women in your social circle, that can kind of come under this umbrella of witch wound as well. But the witch wound can kind of work in two ways. So for some people, it can kind of push you into this direction of you don't trust women and actually you feel safer with men, or you feel safer with people who don't identify as women. Or it can push you in the other direction, where you don't trust men in power. Or you can have a little bit of both going on, which I think is probably the most common for people who are dealing with a witch wound. It's kind of, we get a little bit of both. We don't trust anyone. Isn't that great? So these are some of the things that kind of come up with a witch wound. It's the fear of being seen. It is issues with the masculine and feminine sides of yourself, the masculine and feminine within other people, a distrust of the feminine, a distrust of the masculine. It's great. It works both ways. There's also this other aspect of this is kind of a result from this, is where a lot of people who have a witch wound feel very lonely and they don't feel like they have community. And I've seen some horrendous things play out, and I've talked about this before, but I've seen some really nasty things play out in spiritual communities. I've seen some really, really horrible things play out in women's groups, which is part of the reason that I personally will never hold a women's circle just for women. I understand that there may be a need for that for some people, and that's totally fine. But I have found those spaces to be not as supportive as they sometimes say they are. That's just my experience, though. Maybe you've had a great experience, so that's cool too. But it can be difficult to make friends. It can be difficult to find a community where you feel really, really safe and supported when you have a witch wound. The other thing that happens as well is that you resist your magical power. You don't want to own your power. You don't want to identify as a witch, or it's not just about identifying as a witch, but do you want to tell people you read tarot? Do you want to tell people that you're a light worker or a starseed or whatever other like magical woo-woo labels you use for yourself? If you have a witch wound, you may not want to tell anybody that this is what you do. And if you don't want to tell anybody, that's okay, because for some people it actually isn't safe for you to do that. Maybe you have people around you who are very conservative. Maybe they wouldn't understand. So, you got to do what you've got to do. That's all part of your energy protection. But if you are feeling like, you know what, I think I have this spiritual power. I think I have this like ability to connect with trees or to work with herbs or to read the tarot, but you're kind of scared of it or not wanting to kind of take a step towards it, like if you're resisting your magic in some way, then that can often be a sign that you have a witch wound. So what do we do about it? So I'm going to share with you a couple of things here today that can kind of support you on the journey to releasing this and healing from it and moving forward in your life. The first thing to mention is, yes, I'm going to do a little promo here, very, very brief one, because I hate promos as much as anybody, but I am teaching a class. It's not really a class, it's more like a journey. We're going on a journey. I'm taking you on a journey to the Isle of Avalon. We're going to go there in the etheric. We're going to go there in spiritual form, and we're going to meet with Morgan Le Fay, who is such an incredible energy. She's such an incredible goddess, and she is someone that you can work with for your witch wound as well. If you call on her and ask her for some support, she would definitely be there for you. You can Google her and find out more about her. But essentially, she's one of these magical women from the myths who is very, very misunderstood. She was actually a queen of the fairies. She was an incredible healer, still is an incredible healer. She healed King Arthur. She brought him back to life. She did all these like magical things. And then, like, as you look at the myths, they kind of change over time. If you look at the really, really old myths, she was this magical being who was a healer, and she was a fairy healer, fairy queen healer. And then, later on around the Middle Ages, the stories start to change, and we start to call her a witch, and we start to say that she, had these like evil powers and whatever. And it's really quite fascinating. I feel like she's very much this the archetype of somebody who has gone through the witch wound. Like, she knows the witch wound. So we're going to work with her. We're going to call her in. Of course, we're going to call her in from her highest aspect, from the healing aspect, and she's going to come and help us heal our witch wound as much as we can in 90 minutes. But you'd be surprised what you could do in 90 minutes. We're going to do some breath work. We're going to go on a meditative journey. We're going to do some meditation. We're going to chat. We're going to pull some cards. We're going to do some journaling. It's going to be very magical. The link will be below. Other things you can do. Number one, just start to become aware of it. But that's not to say that, everybody who feels this way needs to identify as somebody who has a witch wound. You might be listening to this and thinking to yourself, Vix, this is just being human. A lot of this stuff that you've talked about is just kind of part of the human experience, and it definitely is. And for some people, it can very much help to say, okay, now I've identified where this may come from, I can start to heal it and work through it. Other people may not resonate with the idea of a witch wound, in which case that's totally fine. You don't have to take on this idea if it doesn't resonate with you. But if it does resonate with you, becoming aware of it can be really, really helpful. So just kind of noticing when things are happening in your life, or when things are coming up for you, and just kind of thinking, oh, somebody asked me today, and this is something that I spent a lot of time dealing with when I first started my spiritual business. People would ask me what I did for a job. And the amount of people I told, because I was transitioning from being a teacher into running my spiritual business, and I told people I was a teacher for so long. I was running my business full time, and I still told people sometimes that I was a teacher. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. And that's the curiosity part of it, right? Like, that's the just noticing part. You don't have to get yourself into any kind of like, oh no, I can't believe I didn't say this. Oh, it's my witch wound. You just go, okay, that's really interesting that I'm still saying that I'm not telling people the truth. And there's always times, like there's still times now, when someone will ask me what I do for a living, and some people I just say I run my own business. And if they ask for details, then sometimes I give details, but sometimes I just get a vibe, and I'm just like, I don't think this person is going to be totally okay or open to it. Sometimes maybe that's wrong, but I like to sometimes err on the side of keeping myself safe in those situations. I've had enough conversations with people in my life who don't get it. And to me, it's just like, well, there's no point in having another one of those, right? So yeah, I just get, I get curious about it, and I go, why did I say that? Was it because I felt fear, or was it because I had an intuitive hit that maybe that person wasn't going to totally be down with it? And if you start to think, actually, yeah, I was in fear and I was scared of what they might say, then you can start to kind of unpack that and think about that a little bit. So doing some shadow work is fun. Doing some shadow work on your witch wound and looking at where you need to take responsibility for the part that you play in creating the witch wound, or not creating it, it's been created already, but the part that you play in keeping it kind of going, you know. Uh, and again, we don't come to this with judgment or self-judgment or anything like that. We just come to this with a place of with a heart of curiosity and a curious mind and a curious heart. So this may come up in the way that you maybe don't support other women. And I have seen this so many times, and I know a lot of people see this too, where you see somebody posting about women supporting women, and then you reach out and ask for a favor, and then you never hear it from them again. Like that's happened to me a few times. So that's interesting. Are you doing that? Are you saying one thing and then acting in a different way? Are you putting all of these posts out about I support women, but when it comes down to it, do you really? And then you have an opportunity to unpack that. Another thing that we do is we judge each other. We 100% judge each other. I do not know a woman on this planet who hasn't looked at another woman and been a little bit judgy. Whether that's somebody that you know, somebody that you've seen on Instagram, somebody that you saw in a TV show. Watching reality TV is really good for this. If you think that you don't judge other people, sit down and watch a reality TV show for half an hour and see if you can stay totally out of judgment. It's really hard. It's really hard. And, this isn't, again, it's just about getting curious. Like, oh, okay, I really judged that person. What was that about? And then you can unpack that, and you can, you do your shadow work around that, and you try to maybe choose a different choice next time. But, shadow work, for me, I always think about shadow work as we bring this stuff up and we look at it and we decide, do we just love and accept ourselves for whatever it is and just go, okay, that's just a part of me, that's fine? Do we try to change it? Do we try to kind of choose something different next time? Or do we want to just leave it? Do we want to just leave it there? So, we always have choices. People talk a lot about integrating the shadow, and I'm kind of more on the page of sometimes integrating the shadow is exactly what we need to do. Sometimes we need to have a look at things and then make some changes. And so it'd be totally different for you, whatever you feel about all of that. But looking into our own stuff and the part that we may be playing and the role that we're playing, and we still, are you still pushing? Who are you pushing on the fire? Are you pushing anyone on the fire? And that can just be, oh, I can't believe so-and-so from this TV show. She's terrible. I can't stand her. All of that kind of stuff. That's not to say that we shouldn't have a safe space where we can vent about things, or that if somebody is problematic or very toxic, that we shouldn't be allowed to express that, because we absolutely should and can, and that can be very important to the healing process. But I think you know what I mean. Okay. So doing your own healing work is also really, really important. Something that I found really useful when it comes to the witch wound is to do some past life healing, doing past life readings for myself. That can be really helpful. Just looking at your past, whether it's your past life or your past in this life, and just kind of noticing and identifying the places where the witch wound was kind of in action and where you kind of really felt it getting created can be really useful, because you can go back. When you're looking at past life stuff, I always find that when I do past life readings for clients, one of the things that I think shifts for people the most is just knowing and just being able to say, okay, now I know why I'm so freaked out about this thing, or now I know why this is such a challenge for me. And so when you know why, then you can really start to kind of move forward, and you can make changes. So that's something that really works with past lives. And if you look at this life, you can go through, you can journal. Maybe there's some stuff. Maybe you need to speak to somebody. Maybe you need to go to therapy. You know, like the witch wound is massive, and it's really, we're all having a totally unique experience with it. There are some similarities, things that, you know, we can kind of go, oh, that's part of the witch wound. But ultimately, you know, if you're having a hard time with something that I've spoken about, any of these things that I've spoken about, getting some support with that, it can be really, really essential and really, really helpful on your healing journey. One thing I also find really helpful to start to heal the witch wound is to tell someone I'm a witch. I had so much resistance to using the word witch for a very, very long time. And I remember really early in my business, I'd only been running my business for like a year or so, and someone reached out and they wanted to do an interview with me. I think it was Vice magazine. Is Vice even a magazine anymore, or is it just a website? Anyway, I did do some stuff with Vice like later on, but when they first reached out, they wanted to talk to somebody who was a witch, and I said to them, I'm not really a witch, so it's like, thanks. Really? Because you teach spiritual development, you read tarot for a living, you do spells, you like have like half of your office is like an altar. It's like, what do you think you are? But it's also one of these things that maybe, you know, these different words don't always resonate at different times, right? Like, I didn't used to really resonate with the word witch. Well, I did when I was young, when I was in high school. I was really, really, really resonated with it when I was in my teen years. I was definitely like resonating with it. And then I just kind of went on this journey, and I went into the church and I did a whole bunch of other things, and then I kind of came out the other side. And I think at that time I was very much resonating with being a light worker, which isn't really and I was having a conversation with Rebecca Campbell the other day, and you can find that on my channel somewhere. And she was saying that she doesn't really resonate with the term light worker anymore, that she prefers mystic. And I think it was really interesting because I kind of felt like I don't really tell people I'm a light worker anymore. And I think part of that is actually because of the way that people, like the connotations with the word light worker now. Like a lot of people are kind of like, you know, oh, light worker. So it's a shame. It's a shame that people can't just use these phrases to kind of identify themselves. If that's, you know, if you feel like you're a light worker, you should be allowed to say that you're a light worker. But you know, these days I'm kind of like, I have a whole list. I'm a witch, I'm a starseed, I'm a light worker, I'm a mystic, I'm a, you know, all these different things. But so choosing a word that describes you, a magician, a magic maker, a mystic, a spiritual seeker. You know, it doesn't have to be a word that is so tied up in history as witch. You know, it doesn't have to be the word witch. It can be any word or any phrase that really resonates with you. But telling someone that that's what you are can be a really powerful way to start to heal yourself and start to take back your spiritual power and your magic power. And so if you don't have anybody to tell, first of all, you can comment on this video and say, I'm a witch, or I'm whatever you want to call yourself. And, you know, tell me. I'm a safe person to tell. If you don't want to put a YouTube comment on because you're worried about who might see your YouTube comment, you can tell yourself. So you can put your hand on your heart and you can close your eyes and you can just say, I am a witch. And that can be really powerful, really, really powerful. I'm a spiritual seeker. I'm a magician. I'm a magic maker. I'm a light worker. I'm a starseed, whatever you want to call yourself. That can be really powerful. And also writing it down somewhere, even if it's just in a private journal or on a piece of paper, and you write down on this piece of paper, I am a witch and I am owning it in this lifetime, or some form of that. I am a magic maker and I am owning that in this lifetime. fold it up and you can burn it. And that's not, you're not burning that to get rid of it. You're burning it as just a symbol of, and putting that in the sacred fire, in the sacred flame. And also, no one else has to know that yet. So those are just a couple of tips on how you can kind of start to heal your witch wound. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What other stuff comes up for you when you think about the witch wound? What is your definition of the witch wound? How have you been working on healing it and making some changes in your own life so that we can start to kind of clear this within ourselves, within the collective as well? It's something else that we can do, is we can start to treat each other better. We can start to treat each other better. No more throwing each other on the fire, right? Like that's ultimately how we're going to heal from this. And you can come to my workshop. It's happening on the 31st of October, which is, of course, Samhain, Halloween, and Beltane if you are here in the Southern Hemisphere. So I've called this a Halloween healing journey, but it's a very much going to be suitable for you whether you live in the Northern Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere. This is a really powerful time energetically, and it is said that this is, the time when the veil is the thinnest and we can connect with our ancestors. And ancestors are not only our ancestors from blood or from love. We also have ancestors of place. So the place where you are physically at any time, you can call on the ancestors of that place. But we also have ancestors of tradition. So whatever traditions that you work with, you can call on the ancestors. And essentially, Morgan Le Fay is an ancestor of us because we are magic makers and we are healers and we are witches. And so was she. So we can call on her because she is a part of this lineage. She's like a witch ancestor. We can call on her anyway, but it just kind of makes that bond a little bit stronger and a little bit easier. And at this time of year, it's going to be really easy to call on her, and I'm just super, super excited. So we'll do some breath work, some meditation, some long, deep relaxation, journeying, card reading, journaling, chatting. This is going to be like a really beautiful 90 minutes. It's via Zoom, and if you can't make it live, there will be an infinite replay. People always ask, how long is the replay going to be around? It will be around for as long as my website is around, pretty much. So there's no rush. You can join us now and you can watch it next year. It's all good. So the link will be below if you want to come to that. If you have other questions, if you have questions about the workshop, if you have questions about the witch wound, if you just want to have a chat, hit me up in the comments. I would love, love, love to connect with you. And yeah, that's it from me. Here's to healing the witch wound for ourselves, for each other, and for the collective. And so it is. Amen. Satnam. Lots of love.